Hey gang, and welcome back. Just a reminder, you can now use the promo code MTGMudsta, all caps, at flipsidegaming.com. You'll get 10% off orders over $10 and help with the channel at the same time. Thank you once again for joining me on this fine Monday. This week we have an interesting lineup, and Matt is playing his Xenagos deck and keeps a hand with Tooth and Nail, 2 Mountains, Command Tower, Somberwall Sage, Rites of Flourishing, and Llanowar Elves. Sean is taking his Nazahn deck out for a spin once more and keeps a hand with 2 Forests, Plains, Sunpetal Grove, Teferi's Protection, Grand Abolisher, and Steel Shaper's Gift. Trevor is playing his Vial Smasher and Ikra deck and keeps a hand with Stomping Ground, Cultivate, Comet Storm, Rootbound Crag, Temple of Malice, Sol Ring, and Arid Mesa. Lastly, Mike is trying out his Sydri deck and keeps a hand with New Benalia, Godless Shrine, Swamp, Dispel, Exquisite Blood, and Divinity of Pride. Matt wins the die roll and starts us off. For the first turn of the game, Matt plays a Command Tower and casts Llanowar Elves before passing. Trevor plays an Arid Mesa, cracking it and taking an additional 2 to find a Blood Crypt before casting Sol Ring and passing turn. Mike plays a New Benalia, coming into play tapped and scrying 1 and puts the card on the bottom. Sean plays a tapped Sunpetal Grove and passes turn. Matt plays a Mountain and casts Nature's Lore to go and find Cinder Glade. He decides not to attack with the Llanowar Elves and passes. Trevor plays a Rootbound Crag and casts Cultivate to find a basic for the field and puts a basic into his hand. Mike plays a tapped Godless Shrine and passes turn. Sean plays a Plains and taps out to cast Grand Abolisher before passing to Matt. Matt plays a Forest and casts his General, Xenagos. He puts the Xenagos combat trigger on his tapped elf as he has no choice, and with nothing else, passes to Trevor. Trevor plays a Temple of Malice, scrying 1 and keeping the card on top. He then brings out Vial Smasher and passes to Mike. Mike plays a Fetid Pool and passes turn. Sean plays a Forest and casts his own Cultivate, finding a basic for the field and 1 to his hand before passing to Matt. Matt plays a Forest and casts Somberwall Sage. Matt then decides to kick things into high gear and casts Rites of Flourishing and plays his second land, which is a Mountain. Moving to combat, Matt puts the Xenagos trigger on the Sage and passes to Trevor. Trevor draws 2 cards for his turn and plays a Swamp. He then casts Harmonize, rolling to randomly assign 4 damage to Sean as Vial Smasher triggers on cast. Trevor then takes 2 to have Stomping Ground come into play untapped and casts Explosive Vegetation. He holds off on searching his library until after combat, which he quickly moves through by swinging Vial Smasher at Mike. With nothing else, Trevor passes turn and goes to find his basics. Mike plays a Swamp and an Island for his lands for turn, and takes the time to cast his General before passing to Sean. Sean plays 2 Forests for his turn and taps out to cast Nazahn. He goes through his library to find the Hammer of Nazahn and equips it onto Nazahn for free. With nothing else, Sean passes turn. Matt draws 2 for his turn and surprisingly has no lands. He instead taps his Somberwall Sage and 3 lands to cast Savage Ventmaw. Moving to combat, he puts the Xenagos trigger on the Ventmaw and swings it at Sean. In his second main phase, Matt uses the mana from the Ventmaw and his remaining 3 lands to cast a Tooth and Nail Entwined. Matt grabs hold of Worldspine Worm and Kiki-Jiki Mirror Breaker and puts them onto the field. Matt then taps the Kiki-Jiki to create a copy of his Worm token during his second main phase, and moving to his end step, sacrifices the token to get 3 5/5 Worm tokens. Trevor plays a Smoldering Marsh and a Command Tower for his lands for turn, and casts Volcanic Vision. Trevor then forks the Vision, targeting the Harmonized and Explosive Vegetation with their respective copies. This deals with everything except for Sean's Nazahn and Matt's Worldspine Worm. He then resolves the Vial Smasher's trigger for casting the original Vision and randomly deals 7 to Mike. Mike plays an Isolated Chapel and taps all but 1 island to cast Divinity of Pride. Sean plays a Forest for his turn and casts Steel Shaper's Gift in his main phase. Sean tutors for Nim Deathmantle and casts it, attaching it to Nazahn for free. Moving to combat, he swings his commander at Matt and uses Nazahn's trigger while he's equipped to tap the defending worm. With nothing else, Sean passes turn. Matt plays a Forest for his turn and casts See the Unwritten, revealing the top 8 cards of his library. Matt, with seemingly endless luck when it comes to revealing off the top with spells and ability, hits Blightsteel Colossus, Malignus, Kozilek, and Fierce Empath. As he meets the requirements for Ferocious, Matt puts the Colossus and Malignus onto the field for free. Moving to Matt's combat step, Trevor invokes the Xenabro Code, meaning that he won't be attacked as long as he's not a threat. Matt then decides to put the Xenagos trigger on Malignus and swings it at Sean, and the Worldspine Worm at Mike. Sean then casts the Teferi's protection he's had in his hand to save himself, but Mike doesn't want to be the only one going down and dispels the instant. Mike then declares his pride as a blocker, and with lifelink actually gains 1 life from blocking, but unfortunately Sean isn't so lucky and loses. With nothing else, Matt passes turn. Trevor plays a Foreboding Ruins, revealing his swamp, and then subsequently plays the swamp he revealed. Trevor then casts Harmonize, and with the spell in the stack, flashes in Dualcaster Mage to create a copy of the spell. He resolves the Vial Smasher trigger for the first Harmonize, however, and despite a 50% chance to hit Matt, he unfortunately hits Mike. Trevor then draws 6 cards, but with no clear answer, has to pass to Mike. For Mike's turn, he draws 2, and much to the disappointment of Trevor, does not have a board wipe. Mike instead decides to cast Clever Impersonator during his first main phase, having it come in as a copy of the Worldspine Worm. Leaving 2 mana open as a threat, Mike decides to pass turn. Matt draws 2, and plays a Forest before casting a Soul Ring. Matt then drops another threat in the form of a giant Adaphage, which gets out of hand very quickly when it connects with Xenagos, and moves to the start of his combat step. This triggers a lot of discussion at the table, with politics of who let what resolve and who hasn't attacked who trying to curry favor with who Matt's about to take out of the game. Matt decides to put the Xenagos trigger on the Colossus and swing it at Trevor, despite the fact that he'd invoked the Xenobro code. Matt also swings the original Worm and Malignus at Mike. Mike declares that he'll block the Malignus with his Worm and take the hit from the Worldspine. Trevor, though, wants to go with a bang and casts Comet Storm when X is 5 and targets Matt. He then resolves the Vial Smasher trigger, which once again selects Mike, and Mike drops to a dangerously low life. However, with not enough toughness on his creatures to stop the Colossus, Trevor dies to infect. Mike draws 2 for his turn and is desperate to gain some life. He thankfully has drawn Noxious Gearhulk, which he casts and it hits the field. He then targets the Worldspine Worm, gaining 15 life, and Matt shuffles the worm into his library after getting 3 5/5 worm tokens. Having regained a bit of life, and with a decent amount of blockers, Mike passes turn. Matt draws 2 for his turn, and unsatisfied with his draw, casts Life Legacy, sacrificing the Malignus to draw some more. Matt then plays 2 mountains and moves to his combat step. He puts the Xenagos trigger once more on the Colossus and swings everything at Mike. Mike puts 2 of the worms and the Gearhulk in the way of the Colossus, and chumps 1 of the other tokens with his last token. With blockers declared, Matt has the opportunity to cast Chaos Warp on 1 of the worm tokens blocking the Colossus. Despite the fact that we've passed the point where Mike could declare whatever he flipped as a blocker, we still go through the motions, and Mike flips over a counterspell, sealing out the game. Game review time. And there you have it, another aggressive game brought to you by the Xenobros. I wouldn't call what Matt had as a start explosive particularly, but it was really rampy early on, which allowed him to basically drop threat after threat after threat later on. I think the turning point for this game was when he was able to resolve the Savage Ventmaw and swing to get the 6 mana from it, and then Tooth and Nail Entwined. It was a good sequence as Matt was unable to cast the spell otherwise, and even though he didn't go for the traditional Perforos and Avenger of Zendikar or Kiki-Jiki and Zealous Conscript, especially considering he cast it in his second main phase, the Worldspine Worm certainly did a good job of sticking around for a while. Trevor's Vial Smasher deck did a great job of copying spells and ramping hard. Unfortunately, the deck does seem to struggle as it doesn't have white or blue with dealing with Indestructible. He was able to buy a turn for himself as he invoked the Xenobro code, but unfortunately he ramped a lot and drew a bunch of cards which made him a big threat for Matt. Mike, as he's prone to do, did a really good job of flying under the radar unless you count Vial Smasher's inherent hate towards him. He built the deck around life gain, but unfortunately you're not going to be able to see it very much more as he's since taken it apart as he doesn't find it too enjoyable. I'm curious what you guys think about him dispelling the Teferi's protection. In my mind, it was an okay play as it took care of one of his opponents without having to get his hands too dirty, and it also curried some favor with Matt. Sean did reveal after dying that he had a grafted exoskeleton in his hand, which meant that even if he'd been able to kill Matt, the table was still going to have to deal with another infected creature. This would have presented the guys with the same kind of trouble as it would have been an indestructible infect creature, but smaller than a Blightsteel Colossus. Please be sure to tune in every Monday and Thursday at 11 AM Eastern Standard Time for a guaranteed new video. You can also follow me on Twitter at MTGMudsta. You can find me on Facebook at facebook.com/mtgmudsta. And lastly, you can check me out when I stream at twitch.tv/mtgmudsta. This video is brought to you in part by support from my Patreons. If you're looking for a way to help out the channel, please be sure to visit my Patreon link below. And as always, thank you guys for watching, and please be sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe for more.